We're going to talk about Pareto analysis. And Pareto analysis, why is it so important and why does it need to be used in the workplace? Well, I'm a big supporter of Pareto analysis, and many years ago in the 1990s, I was fortunate enough to be working with probably one of the most efficient organisations in the world, which is Nissan in the northeast of England, in the Sunderland. And the site manager used to work with me on some of the problems that we delivered up at Durham University. And one thing that Brian Cobb, another Brian, said to me was, we at Nissan, we teach every employee how to do a Pareto analysis at the very front end of them joining the business. And the reason why we do that is because it has the biggest impact on the way that they think from day one. And I've always remembered that, and I've always used Pareto analysis in every improvement workshop or program that I've done. So let's explain what Pareto is. Well, let's understand, why is it called Pareto analysis? Well, funnily enough, there was a guy called Pareto, Vilfredo Pareto. Back in the 1890s, he had a eureka moment where he realized, he was an Italian economist, he realized that 90% of the wealth, probably more than that, is owned by a very small proportion of people that lived in Italy. Likewise, the majority of people live in a very small landmass. And that's the Pareto principle. It sort of became known as the 80-20 rule. So let's think of it how it might affect you. If you go back to your workplace and just list the amount of suppliers that supplies your organisation, and you might have 20, you might have 30, you might have 1,000. If you list the top 2, 3, 4, you suddenly find that's where you're spending 80-90% of your expenditure. So it shows you straight away how the Pareto principle works. Likewise, when you look at your customers, where your income comes from, you look at it in terms of, you might have lots of customers, but there's very few customers that bring in the big bucks, and that's generally the case. What the Pareto principle is to focus on the vital few, not the insignificant many. Once we have the Pareto in place, we make it visual, we create the Pareto charts. When people start looking at the Pareto chart, they can often see the resources being taken up in the insignificant many. We're not resourcing the vital few. If we resource the vital few in terms of reducing errors, making things flow better, suddenly we're getting a massive improvement. If we're focusing on the insignificant many, we're making an insignificant change which isn't really felt by the business process. Now, on the island of Jersey, there's a lovely organisation here. They walk dogs. But they don't just walk dogs on a small scale. This is quite a large business. It's two ladies that run a dog walking business. And when I got them involved in the program, they felt a little bit of lack of understanding of business activities. And when we did the program with them, they began to learn a bit more about their business by doing some Pareto charts. And what we found was there's a very few small number of customers, which is where most of your income comes from. And there's a lot of activity which is taking up resource where there's lots of low income. By doing those Pareto charts, it got them to think differently about how they could manage the business, and also how they could manage the dog walkers that work for them to maximise the efficiency of the dog walkers by measuring things often on a daily basis, just by applying the Pareto principle. Now, another great example, it's an outsourcing company, and I've worked with this company from day one when they started off the business. And what they do is they go to companies and they do their office management facilities for them, and they charge them based on the income that they generate in their business. That's the way that they were setting up their contracts. Operationally, there was a disconnect. Because what we found then, when we analysed the information, operationally, all the defects and errors, which was taking up all the time that they were paying for, working for their clients, they were finding lots and lots of errors coming from the same businesses. But it's only when we did the Pareto exercise that this highlighted. Now, to summarize that, they had roughly 70 clients. And those 70 clients were creating defects and problems as they fed the information into them, which we measured, which was a significant loss to the business. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands of pounds when we annualize it over the year. But what we found was that 6 companies out of that 70 were over 50% of all the defects. They were responsible for over 50% of all the defects. That then gave them the management information to manage that better, put proper service level agreements in place, get the clients to understand where their problems were, because they didn't know where they were. And once they knew where they were, guess what happens? The problems significantly fall. That means the resource that they're paying for as part of their outsourcing can be done a lot more efficiently. And what that means is the whole supply chain benefits. Now, this business now has gone on to be an international business, and it's probably 10 times the size it was when I first worked with them about 10, 15 years ago. But what it tells me is that if you solve these problems very early on in the business process, so for all you small businesses out there that are thinking about growth, the best time to apply Pareto thinking is from the early days, because it stays with you forever and you're always going to focus on the vital few. The great thing about Pareto is that there will always be a vital few until you eliminate all your defects. And guess what? You will never delete or get rid of all your defects. I often say to people jokingly, you won't live long enough. And that's not me trying to sort of make them feel bad about their age, what have you. It's to sort of get people to understand is that problems will always be there. The thing about improvement and continuous improvement is how you deal with them and how you make people understand how to deal with them by giving them visual, simple information.